The smell of lavender and antiseptic had become my world. As I carefully adjusted Thomas's pillow for what would be the last time, my sister-in-law Patricia barged into the room without knocking, her Louis Vuitton heels clicking against the hardwood floor I'd polished that morning. "The funeral home will be here in an hour," she announced, not even glancing at her brother-in-law's peaceful face. "You'll need to pack your things and be out by tomorrow. We'll be listing the house immediately." I nodded quietly, too exhausted and grief-stricken to argue. After 8 years of devoted care, I was being dismissed like hired help. Patricia smirked at my silence, mistaking it for defeat. If only she knew. "My name is Elena Kowalski, and I'm 32 years old. 8 years ago, I was working as a hospice nurse in Chicago, living a quiet life in my small apartment, when my older brother Michael called with news that would change everything." "Elena, it's about Thomas," he'd said, his voice strained. "You remember my wife Patricia's brother? There's been an accident." I knew Thomas vaguely from family gatherings. He was the quiet, bookish younger brother who'd become wildly successful in tech before retiring early at 35. While Patricia had married my brother for his modest but stable income, Thomas had built and sold 2 companies, accumulating a fortune that made the rest of the family seem middle class by comparison. "Skiing accident in Aspen," Michael continued. "Spinal cord injury. He's quadriplegic." "Elena." Patricia's beside herself. What I'd learn later was that Patricia was beside herself not with worry, but with calculations about her brother's estate. The family meeting was held at Thomas's house, a stunning Victorian mansion he'd restored himself before the accident. Patricia sat at the head of the dining table like she owned the place, with my brother Michael beside her, and their adult children, Brandon and Jessica, flanking them. "Obviously, Thomas will need full-time care," Patricia announced. "We've looked into facilities, but they're frightfully expensive." "How expensive?" asked Brandon, who was perpetually between jobs and living off his parents. "Around $15,000 a month for a decent place," Patricia said, watching everyone's faces carefully. "It would eat through his savings within years." That was my first clue, the way she said his savings like she was already counting it. "Elena's a nurse," Michael offered hesitantly. "Maybe she could." "I couldn't ask that of family," Patricia interrupted with fake concern. "It's too much." But her eyes were calculating as they turned to me. I saw the wheels turning, free family labor versus expensive professional care. "I'd be happy to help," I said, genuinely meaning it, "at least temporarily, until you find a permanent solution." Patricia's smile was sharp. "How generous." "Of course, Thomas would insist on paying you something. Would $500 a week be fair?" I should have known then. A professional caregiver for someone with Thomas's needs would cost 5 times that. But I wasn't thinking about money, I was thinking about a man who needed help. The first time I met Thomas after his accident, he was nothing like I expected. Despite being paralyzed from the chest down with limited use of his arms, his green eyes were sharp with intelligence and humor. "So you're the sacrificial lamb," he said with a wry smile. "Patricia convinced you I'm a charity case?" "She said you needed help," I replied, adjusting his blankets. "What I need," he said quietly, "is someone I can trust." Patricia's been eyeing my bank accounts since the day I woke up in the hospital. That honesty set the tone for our relationship. Thomas was brilliant, funny, and refreshingly direct. He'd adapted to his new reality with technology, voice-controlled systems for the house, specialized computer interfaces that let him continue trading stocks and managing his investments. "I'm not dead," he'd say whenever Patricia visited and talked about him like he wasn't there. "Just paralyzed. My brain works fine." But Patricia treated him like a child, or worse, like he was already gone. She'd bring Brandon and Jessica bi-monthly, always with some new scheme that needed funding. "Uncle Thomas, I just need $50,000 for this amazing startup opportunity," Brandon would whine. "Uncle Thomas, Paris Fashion Week is so important for my influencer career," Jessica would plead. Thomas would refuse politely, and they'd leave in huffs, Patricia muttering about family loyalty. As months turned to years, I became not just Thomas's caregiver but his confidant, his friend, his connection to a world that had largely abandoned him. We developed routines, morning physical therapy, afternoon reading sessions where I'd turn pages while he devoured everything from quantum physics to mystery novels, evening movies with elaborate commentary. "You know what the worst part is?" he said one night after Patricia had visited to complain about her financial struggles while wearing a new $3,000 watch. "I made most of my money after the accident. Turns out being bedridden gives you lots of time to study market patterns." "They don't know?" I asked, surprised. "Why would I tell them? They already treat me like a wallet with a wheelchair attached." The family's visits became less frequent as Thomas remained stubbornly alive and alert. They'd call occasionally, usually when they needed something. Patricia would demand I put Thomas on speaker and then talk to him like he was senile. "Thomas, dear, are you eating well? Is Elena taking good care of you?" "My hearing is fine, Patricia," he'd respond dryly. "It's my legs that don't work." During year 3, I made a decision that would later prove crucial. The small stipend barely covered my gas to drive to Thomas's house, and I was burning through my savings paying rent on an apartment I never used. "This is ridiculous," Thomas said one day. "Move into the East Wing. I've got 8 empty bedrooms." "Patricia won't like that," I warned. "Patricia doesn't like anything that doesn't benefit Patricia. Move in." "Elena." When Patricia found out, she was livid. "It's inappropriate. What will people think? That a paralyzed man needs round-the-clock care?" Thomas shot back. "Shocking scandal. Living there made everything easier. I could monitor Thomas at night, respond quickly to emergencies, and maintain the house that Patricia kept insisting was too much for poor Thomas to handle." Year 4 brought a significant change. Thomas called his lawyer, William Chen, for a series of private meetings. They'd lock themselves in the study for hours, emerging with carefully neutral expressions. "Estate planning," Thomas explained when I asked. "Just making sure everything's in order." "Don't talk like that," I said, though we both knew his condition was gradually worsening. "Elena," he said seriously, "I need you to promise me something. When I'm gone, don't let them bully you. You're stronger than you think." Around year 5, Thomas made an interesting request. "I want to transfer some properties into a trust," he told William during one of their meetings. "The beach house in Malibu, the cabin in Vermont, and the investment properties downtown." "All of them?" William asked, taking notes. "All of them. Make Elena the sole trustee." I overheard from the hallway where I was organizing medications. "Thomas, I can't." "You can and you will," he said firmly. "Someone needs to manage them, and you're the only one I trust." What he didn't mention, what I wouldn't learn until later, was that he'd also been quietly transferring ownership of other assets. The main house, through a series of legal maneuvers, was no longer in his name. Neither were several investment accounts, the art collection, or the classic car collection in the garage. Years 6 and 7 were the hardest. Thomas's condition deteriorated, requiring more intensive care. I learned to manage ventilators, feeding tubes, complex medication schedules. Some nights, I'd camp out in his room, monitoring his breathing, ready to act if something went wrong. Patricia's visits stopped almost entirely. She'd call occasionally, usually to complain about money or fish for information about Thomas's condition. "Is he, still aware?" she'd ask hopefully. "He's sitting right here, Patricia. Would you like to talk to him?" "Oh, no, that's fine. Just checking on my dear brother." The only family member who showed genuine care was surprisingly Jessica. Something had changed in her, maybe maturity, maybe a bad breakup that gave her perspective. She started visiting monthly, actually talking to Thomas instead of at him. "I'm sorry about before, Uncle Thomas," she said during one visit. "The money stuff. I was a spoiled brat." "You were young," Thomas said kindly. "People change." "Not everyone," she replied, glancing at the door. "Mom's already planning what to do with your house." "Is she now?" Thomas asked with interest. "She and Dad have blueprints. They want to turn it into an event venue. Brandon's planning to sell your book collection." Thomas and I exchanged looks. After Jessica left, he called William again. The last year was a blur of medical crises and quiet moments. Thomas faced each challenge with the same dry humor that had sustained him throughout. "At least I'm consistent," he joked after a particularly bad night, stubbornly refusing to follow anyone's timeline but my own. 2 weeks before he passed, Patricia made a rare appearance with papers. "Thomas, we need to discuss giving me power of attorney," she announced. "For when, you can't make decisions anymore." "My mind is perfectly clear, Patricia," Thomas said coldly, "as is my opinion of your request." "I'm trying to help," she snapped. "Elena's obviously overwhelmed. Look at this place, it's falling apart." I bit my tongue. The house was immaculate, Thomas's care was impeccable, and we both knew what she really wanted. "Get out," Thomas said quietly, "and don't come back unless you're here to actually visit me, not my bank accounts." She stormed out, and that was the last time she saw him alive. Thomas passed on a quiet Tuesday morning, just as the sun painted his bedroom walls gold. I was holding his hand, reading from his favorite Tolkien passage, when he squeezed gently and was gone. I called the family, then sat with him until they arrived, saying goodbye to the man who'd become my closest friend. Patricia arrived within an hour, Michael and Brandon in tow. She walked past Thomas's body without a glance, already on her phone with a realtor. Yes, it's a 7-bedroom Victorian, original hardwood throughout. We'll need it cleaned out quickly. That's when she informed me I needed to leave, like I was an appliance they no longer needed. The funeral was elegant but cold, organized by Patricia to impress her society friends rather than honor Thomas. She gave a speech about family dedication that made me physically ill. Jessica sat with me in the back, both of us mourning the man they'd never bothered to know. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at William Chen's downtown office. I arrived early, wearing the simple black dress I'd worn to countless medical appointments. The family arrived in a convoy of luxury vehicles, dressed like they were attending a gala. "Why is the nurse here?" Patricia demanded immediately. "Ms. Kowalski is named in the will," William said calmly. "Shall we begin?" He started with the small bequests, donations to spinal cord research, gifts to a few distant relatives, his book collection to the local library. Brandon actually gasped at that one. "Now, to the family," William continued, "to my sister-in-law Patricia, who visited me exactly 17 times in 8 years. I've kept a log. I leave the sum of $1,700. $100 for each visit." Patricia's face went white. "That's impossible." "To my nephew Brandon, who saw me as nothing more than a potential investor. I leave my collection of rejection letters from every startup I wisely chose not to fund. May they serve as a lesson in due diligence." Brandon slumped in his chair. "To my niece Jessica, who showed genuine growth and compassion in my final years. I leave $500,000 in trust for her education, available only for tuition and academic expenses." Jessica started crying quietly. "To my brother-in-law Michael, who allowed his wife to treat me as an inconvenience rather than family. I leave nothing but the hope that he finds his backbone someday." Michael couldn't meet anyone's eyes. William paused, shuffling papers. "Now, to address the bulk of the estate. Mr. Novak was very specific in his instructions. The house at 47 Riverside Drive is not part of my estate, as I transferred ownership 3 years ago to Ms. Elena Kowalski in recognition of her devoted care and friendship." "What?" Patricia screeched. "Furthermore, the beach house, mountain cabin, and 4 investment properties are held in an irrevocable trust, with Ms. Kowalski as the sole beneficiary. The various investment accounts totaling approximately $3.2 million were also transferred to Ms. Kowalski over the past 2 years as gifts, all properly documented and taxes paid." The room erupted. Patricia was screaming about elder abuse and undue influence. Brandon kicked a chair. Michael was frantically calling someone on his phone. William raised his hand. "I'm not finished." Mr. Novak anticipated this reaction and asked me to read this statement. "Elena gave up 8 years of her life to care for me, not for money, but out of genuine kindness. She was paid less than minimum wage while Patricia lived in luxury, visited rarely, and treated me as already dead. Every transfer was made while I was of sound mind, with proper legal counsel, and with full knowledge of what I was doing. I have extensive documentation, including recordings, of every interaction. Challenge this will, and my lawyers have instructions to release everything." "She's a gold digger," Patricia snarled. "She manipulated him." I finally spoke. "I loved him. He was my friend. And you're right, I did manipulate him. I manipulated him into laughing again, into enjoying his life despite his limitations, into believing he was more than just a bank account in a wheelchair." "You can't keep the house," Patricia said desperately. "It's been in Thomas's family for generations." "Actually," William interjected, "Thomas bought it 5 years before his accident. There's no family history. Ms. Kowalski, however, has maintained and improved it for 8 years. We'll sue," Brandon threatened. "With what money?" I asked quietly. "The money you assumed you'd inherit? The money Thomas made through careful investing while paralyzed, proving his mind was sharp until the end." Jessica stood up. "Stop. Just stop. Elena earned everything she got. We all know it. We just expected to profit from ignoring Uncle Thomas while she did all the work." "Jessica," Patricia hissed. "No, Mom, I'm done. Uncle Thomas saw us clearly, and we got what we deserved." She turned to me. "Thank you for taking care of him, for being the family we should have been." The aftermath was predictable. Patricia tried everything: private investigators, social media smear campaigns, attempting to break into the house one night. The security system Thomas had installed worked perfectly, but for every accusation, William had documentation, time-stamped videos of Thomas making decisions, medical records showing his mental clarity, recordings of Patricia discussing how to handle Thomas's money when he died. I kept the house but changed things. The East Wing became a respite center for caregivers. offering free stays to those caring for family members with spinal injuries. Thomas's study became a library open to medical students. The fortune he left me funds research and support programs. Patricia and Michael divorced within a year, without Thomas's estate to fall back on. Their lifestyle crumbled. Brandon moved back in with Patricia, still chasing get-rich-quick schemes. Jessica used her inheritance to become a nurse. Inspired, she said, by watching me care for her uncle. I still live in the main house, in the room next to where Thomas spent his final years. Sometimes I roll his old wheelchair through the halls, remembering our conversations, our jokes, our quiet moments of understanding. People sometimes ask if I feel guilty about inheriting so much. I tell them about the night terrors, the medical emergencies, the 8 years of watching a brilliant man navigate a world that saw him as broken. I tell them about missed dates, lost friendships, the career I put on hold, but mostly, I tell them about Thomas, his humor, his resilience, his refusal to be defined by his limitations. He didn't leave me his fortune as payment. He left it to me because I was the only one who never asked for it, never expected it, never counted the days until I could claim it. I just wanted my friend to live as well as possible for as long as possible. The house is full of life now. Caregivers rest in rooms Patricia planned to turn into rental units. Medical students study in the library Brandon wanted to liquidate. The foundation Thomas secretly established before his death funds equipment for people with spinal injuries. And in the garden Thomas could see from his window, where I planted roses he could smell when we opened the windows. There's a simple stone bench with a plaque, for Thomas, who taught me that the greatest inheritance is love freely given. Patricia drove by last month. I saw her silver Mercedes slow down as she passed the house she'd already mentally redecorated. I wondered if she finally understood that Thomas hadn't disinherited her out of spite, but out of clarity. He'd given everyone exactly what they'd earned. She got $1,700. I got a home, a fortune, and the memory of 8 years with the best friend I ever had. Sometimes the universe has a sense of justice after all.